Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur. This is part 2 of the 222 subscriber Q&A responses. So it might be called something like food, film, fashion, and life philosophy. We'll see. Everybody asked so many great questions. I'm going to jump into those. These will be the book reading questions. And I'm going to start off with prompt 1. Jason over at Byways in Bookland asked the question that might have been on everybody's mind. Do you tie your own bow ties? Well, let's find out. So it might be a little bit tougher than it usually is. Let's see. A mirror, my kingdom for a mirror. Let's see. All right. There you go, Jason. And everybody else, I think we're ready to continue. Yes, I do. I actually learned off of YouTube. And no self-respecting sartorial savant would use a pre-tied bow tie is all I'm going to say to that. Brian at Bookish asked, is it the heat or the humidity? I'm going to go with, it's a dry heat here in Arizona. It's extraordinarily hot in the summer. So in terms of Fahrenheit, it gets up to the upper 110s, can crack 120 every now and then. In terms of Celsius, for those who are outside of the U.S., I want to say it's above 40 degrees Celsius. I never check that. So it gets extremely high here, but it is dry. It's not humid at all. My wedding, not my anniversary, but my actual wedding day, was one of the hottest days on record in the city of Phoenix. So it was maybe top 5 at the time, still top 10. It was just brutally hot, but we were indoors, and so it was so cold from the air conditioning indoors that people, when we weren't dancing, people were so cold they would step outside to warm up. And everybody, you know, on social media and stuff had pictures of the thermometers on their car dashboards with how hot it was outside, and they threw that up on social media. So it's a dry heat, which just means it's not humid. So as long as you are hydrated and stay hydrated and put some sunscreen on, you can be outside for extended periods of time. So I grew up running cross country and track. I still do a lot of hiking, even in the summer, and I just make sure I have a huge amount of water. So I don't have a hydro flask for those hikes. I carry a hydro flagon, is what I call it, because it's this enormous thing. And you know, it's really just important to stay hydrated. I've visited throughout the Southeast. I have some family there, extended family, and that feels like a place where you are all sweaty and you go take a shower and you go dry off and you feel like you're still needing to dry off. So it's a little different here, but it is hot. Jason's other questions: do you write any poetry, prose, or a journal? So I journal frequently, not quite daily, but I journal frequently. I have a notebook. It's actually right here. This is an owl one, and so this just kind of has notes throughout it, but a fair amount of it is like quotations from what I read, and then I will reflect on that kind of just in the notes right there. So that's a fair amount of it. I also write some poetry. Notoriously, I'll do it like if I'm standing in line at a museum or something waiting to go in. I'll just stand there and like relax my mind by thinking in verse. But yeah, that's sort of the extent of my like writing. Other questions. Jason also wants to know what my favorite theorem is. Gödel's incompleteness theorems. So the first one deals with the idea that it's, if you think of arithmetic and mathematics, we have all these ideas around addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and we sort of just accept those. And Gödel's incompleteness theorems suggest that there's no way to build a set of axioms or sort of principles that based on just that set of axioms you can prove all of the arithmetic operations that we do. The second one then says not only can you not build a consistent one that will cover all arithmetic, but you can't actually even build one that can be proved in sort of by itself. So those are just absolutely fascinating. I'll talk more about those with a later question. All right, and this question actually. So question 3 came from Rose Threewood, who I think has changed her name to on YouTube to Rosie Meadows, but just always provides wonderful comments. Thank you. She wants to know, what is your profession? Well, the simple answer is I'm an academic arsonist. So I light minds on fire, academics, you know. So I'm a teacher. I've taught middle and high school, so throughout secondary. I've taught sciences, sort of like integrated sciences where they're combined, biology, chemistry, physics. I taught physics for a long time, like 5 years. I've taught, now I teach math exclusively, so I've taught all the maths, Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, Calculus, AP Statistics, College Mathematics, and so one of the ways I like to start my College Mathematics courses, whether, you know, high school age or whoever, is with arithmetic and Gödel's incomplete theorems, and just ask them to prove to me why a negative number multiplied by a positive number needs to be negative. You know, I'll just ask that. We just start right off with some discussions. I always joke, it's not like your typical math class. We're going to collect a lot of data, we're going to prove a lot of things, we're going to really get in and discuss and analyze. It's not just going to be, here's an algorithmic procedure, I'm going to write it down, everybody, you know, sit down, shut up, copy what I do, and then replicate what I do. It's very much, well, how do we think that? Why do we think that? What's our evidence? Why should we think that? Why is that an efficient algorithm? So I have a lot of fun with it. I've also taught some interesting little like capstone courses where it's around students developing projects for their local communities so that they can sort of feel that they're leaders within their communities. I've worked with some Native American students, a lot of Hispanic students, African American students. I've had a habit I found out of, I go into schools that are under state oversight and work to help get them out of that, and they're usually like lower income schools, and I found out that the past 2 schools I've gone to both have gone into state oversight with the same administrator. I never knew this. I just was hired at both schools with sort of like the turnaround team, and so I'm now like, you know, trying to figure out, is this administrator found a new school, because that might be my next job, sadly. But I'm an academic arsonist. I have a lot of fun. I light minds on fire. Jen at Remembered Reads asked, what is the strangest experience of your life? Beyond finding out that my wife was really interested in me and wanted to date me, especially when I had like longer hair down to my shoulders and would walk around in like Birkenstock sandals all the time in college. You know, she saw that there were layers to Jack, and that she wanted to explore, and that I needed to explore. So I'll say the one that jumps to mind is when I was in college. I was a resident assistant, so I was an RA. I would go. I lived in a dorm, and then on the wing of about 20 like freshmen for the most part. And even though they were co-ed halls, I always had wings that were all male students. If they had issues, or if they were struggling with academics, or they needed just some support, navigating college, navigating being away from home, things like that, how to do laundry, blowing a fuse in the building, I would take care of those things and just support them. And then, you know, we'd have to do rounds throughout the building, whichever nights you're on duty. And so there was one night, and these were at 7, 10, and 12 at night, and then again at 2 a.m. if it was a weekend. So there was one where I was going around doing rounds with another RA, and we were on the 4th floor of our hall, and as we were coming down, we both thought we had passed the 3rd floor, which would have just been one, you know, down and down one flight of stairs. But as we walked, we both thought we'd passed the 3rd floor, and then we were walking, and we went out to walk like into the 2nd floor to, you know, do rounds, because we'd sort of done a zigzag loop. And we go walking out there, and we're on the 3rd floor. And we both had this experience of being convinced we had already walked past it and we're down to the 2nd floor, and we weren't. And we were both baffled. You know, neither of us had had anything to drink or any substances or anything like that. And it was just such a strange experience. Neither of us could ever explain it. We talked about it for the next 6 months while we were in college, but it was weird. It was very unsettling. Prompt 5. Lost Cunningham asks, what album takes you back to your youth, 15 to 18 years of age? So obviously the Now albums, I think like Now 7 maybe, would have been, just feel this is not quite, there we go. Now 7, I think, was right around that time, like right after I turned 15, and so the next 12 of those, maybe, would be like sort of what was popular when I was in high school. Specific albums, I didn't listen to this one, but my brother did, and all of my friends did, so I heard it ad nauseum, was Blink-182's Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. One that I did listen to and was sort of introduced to by friends, and I think this came out in 2003, so this would have been like my junior and senior year of high school. In fact, I think it was just my senior year of high school. Was By the Way by the Red Hot Chili, it came out earlier than that, but By the Way by the Red Hot Chili Peppers, which has the Zephyr song and By the Way, but also has Tear, which is an excellent song. I don't believe it was ever a single, but it was the best song on the album. And then the other one that jumps out is Led Zeppelin III, and the reason for that is I bought that album. That's the first CD I got after my father had passed away when I was 16, and so I remember like everything about that sort of month period. There's just day after day of events like seared in my brain. So Disraeli Gears by Cream was the last one I got before he passed away, and then Led Zeppelin III was the first one I got. And so both of those albums just like zip me back to 2003, and I just am sort of like in that headspace. I love Led Zeppelin III though. Out on the Tiles, better than Black Dog. It's some music from that is used as the intro to Black Dog on like their live album How the West Was Won. It used to be played on the radio, and I'd get really excited and turn it up because I thought it was Out on the Tiles. And then I'd turn it down because it was Black Dog, and I was like, this song's overplayed. So there you go, some albums that take me back. I'm going to hit the other film question at the end. 6, the Codex Cantina wants to know, tweed jackets, bow ties, matching sunglasses with tank tops, which was happenstance. This weekend it was a blue tank top with red sunglasses, so it didn't match. Reflect on your fashion choices in your day-to-day life. I like to exercise the palette, if you will. We don't even get into the fact that I own pants in every color except for yellow and orange, and I own more than one pair of purple pants, and so I don't ever wear the same color of pants twice in a row, and that includes from Friday to Monday at work. So I wear a Hawaiian shirt or like tropical print once a week. I wear the school like t-shirt once a week with the rest of the staff, and then I wear a tie the other days, and usually a bow tie and jacket once a week. And I just have fun. Honestly, it's exercising the palette. Get as many colors as possible. When I taught physics and I taught light, I would start with white light, which is all of the light. So I would wear white pants, and I would work through the color spectrum across the light unit. So I'd go red, and then, and then I'd have orange, and then a yellow shirt, and then green, and maybe green pants, and then blue, and maybe blue pants, and different shades of green and blue, and then over into violet, and then I would wear black at the end. And so it was sort of my way of doing the color spectrum with my clothing. So anyways, that's my reflection of my fashion choices. I try to have a lot of fun and wear as many colors as possible. My wife helped me with that. She's very bold. Prompt 7, Trip wants to know, what is it about the desert that draws you there? So people might talk about the mountain grandeur or the Grand Canyons in Arizona, and it is amazing. The petrified forest is just as strange and like gloriously beautiful. Cacti are terrifyingly weird. We do get some Joshua trees in western Arizona, although that's mainly in California, but it's still a connecting desert, and they're just really fascinating. I think for me what it comes down to is this: in most places you have enough vegetation that the environment is basically protected from erosion and wind erosion and flooding and water erosion. Now it still occurs, obviously, but it's very different. It takes quite a bit to like radically alter a landscape. That's not true in a desert because there's not a lot of vegetation. It's a fragile landscape, and so flash flooding across Arizona totally alters and changes certain aspects of the landscape, and they can be totally dangerous. So you need to be really aware of that if you ever travel here. That when it rains, it can quickly flood, and you don't want to get stuck in like a ravine or a wash or something in your vehicle. Like, just a quick PSA. But it can change, and so I like to think of life as an aspect of change, and this will be the only like book moment I think in this. This is from Edmund Spencer's Fairy Queen, and it's right at the end. These are the mutability cantos. And I think this is sort of a mantra for life and growth. So at the very end, then again I think on that which nature said, of that same time when no more change shall be, but steadfast rest of all things firmly stayed upon the pillars of eternity. That is contrary to mutability, for all that moves doth in change delight. And that's it. For everything that moves, delights in change. Like, our lives are full of change. We read new books instead of rereading the same books. We, purchase different clothes. Like, we do all these things. We don't eat the same meal over and over and over. And we do that because we do delight in change. And I think you get to see a changing landscape, and not humans going and altering landscape, but a changing landscape in a desert in a very different way than you do elsewhere. That said, I love other climates and landscapes. When I flew to Seattle and we passed Mount Rainier, I was amazed. I'd never seen anything like that. The Mississippi River and the Missouri River and the Ohio River amazed me with just how wide and how much water there is there. Lake Michigan, my wife's from Chicago, so Lake Michigan is just a glorious blue jewel. And we went to the Smoky Mountains about just over a year ago, and that was one of the most incredible, experiences I've ever had. But I still love the desert, and I think a big part of it is because of the way that we can actually perceive change there. Prompt 8, Pete's sake, what are your favorite meals or dishes? So, Mexican food. We had tacos tonight. I fry my own shells, and you use corn tortillas for that, and you fry them and get them to form the nice shell. But periodically we run out, like we did today with the social distancing guidelines. Even though they're relaxed, I'm going to run to the store for 5 more corn tortillas, so I just grabbed the flour ones, which are larger, and I fried up some flour shell tacos, which then end up being about this big. And I eat one of those. I actually use that as a math problem for my students with quadratic proportions. So the difference between a corn tortilla and a flour tortilla, and you can measure it. What would be the difference in area in terms of like how much taco filling you're getting? I'll give you a hint. It's not just double if it's double the radius or double the diameter. That's my only hint. But, so I love Mexican food. I love Sonoran food. I love burritos. I really like Chinese food though. I love when we go to California because I can get more like authentic Chinese food that's just amazing and delicious. And the single best meal I ever had, like outside of my wife and I cooking, because we cook quite a bit, was a crab pasta in Venice. It was like pasta with crab meat in a crab shell, and we had it in Venice, and it was incredible. It didn't have like a red sauce. It had like a white wine garlic sauce with it. It was the only place we went back to on our trip through Italy. It's the only time we went back to a restaurant was to get that, and we both ordered then the same dish and ate it because we liked it so much. And then barbecue. I love barbecue. I love all types of barbecue. I will sometimes make some special sauces. I have this great barbecue cookbook. I smoked ribs yesterday, and I'm going to deep fry a couple of those this week. And I have a white barbecue sauce, which many people have never had. It's regional to, I believe, northern Alabama. They usually put it on chicken, and that's usually what I do, but it's a great tangy, like creamy barbecue sauce. It's perfect for summer because it's nice and cool. So anyways, I love food. Enormous quantities of it. It's probably unhealthy. And now, this will be the point at which I'm going to film nerd for a few minutes, hopefully not too long. The first one will be Lost Cunningham's other question, which is, what is your favorite horror movie? Well, if I gave one movie, it would be Inferno from 1980, directed by Dario Argento, and the music is by Keith Emerson, of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, the prog rock band. So you have a prog rock composer who fancies himself as the Bach of the 20th century, except he's doing a horror soundtrack, so he's sort of aping the style and influence of like Europop 70s bands, and it's just such a weird soundtrack. The lighting is really wild. It feels like Technicolor, so it's a giallo film, Italian giallo film, which means you have like the great deep red colors, the bright, but it's from 1980, so it's a Technicolor giallo film like style that's also got a lot of neon in it. So there's like bright blue and purple and red lights just going off. The music's crazy, and it's just a wild film. I can't explain necessarily why it's perfect. It's the man gets a weird letter from his sister, so he goes back to where she's been living, and this apartment building she's been living in that may be like a place where a witch has been living for years. And it is a somewhat graphic and gory in terms of some of the violence. I just wouldn't recommend it to children. I saw it when I was in college, and I've deeply loved it. Argento also does a lot of great movies. So Suspiria, which was recently remade, and the remake was okay, but Suspiria is a lot of times regarded as his best. Inferno's this sort of spiritual sequel to Suspiria. They both deal with these like three witches and separate witches. Deep Red is quite good from him. Tenebrae is another one I really like of his movies. I love, though, as a kid, I loved the old Universal horror films. So Frankenstein, not too similar to the book by Mary Shelley, and effective, I think, in its own right because of some of those changes. But that was just a movie I loved to watch as a kid. I always thought it was interesting. My older daughter has seen it, and she thinks it's kind of weird and interesting. She doesn't always get the horror. She's just more curious and asks, well, why is that man sad? Why is that man like being mean to the lady on her wedding day? Bride of Frankenstein's solid. I really like, though, and then The Mummy and The Invisible Man are both fantastic as well. But in the 40s, Universal did a thing where they got together a whole group of their horror characters and actors, and they did two films, House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula. I love both of those. In the first one, in House of Frankenstein, Boris Karloff plays a mad scientist. Lon Chaney Jr. is the Wolf Man. They have this plot around trying to revive Frankenstein's monster, and hilariously, John Carradine plays Dracula, and it's an aesthetic that is just out of this world. He's the father of David Carradine from Kill Bill, Keith Carradine, who's sort of like that guy for westerns and a bunch of stuff. Robert Carradine, who was in Revenge of the Nerds, and the dad in the Lizzie McGuire show. Their father, John, plays Dracula, and it's just, he's got this mustache that feels very 80s, and it's just a real send-up. I loved that film as a kid. Other horror films that I really like, The Exorcist, there's a lot. Halloween, That's a great one. And then more recently, I really liked Get Out. I thought that was cool. Horrifying, but cool. I have some students at school where we can do some of the lines from that really comically. We're all the suburbs. Uh, so I like that. And I've watched a lot of the Conjuring films. Conjuring 2, Curse of La Llorona, The Nun. Those are effective. I kind of want to rewatch a lot of those and sort of figure out how much I enjoy them. But my favorite's Inferno. And then Seeking Stories asked like the whopper of all. You know, if Jason threw down a gauntlet with the bow tie, Seeking Stories threw down a gauntlet with this question, which was, what's your favorite movie? I was like, what? And he goes, maybe 5. I was like, what? So I'm going to list a few. I'm going to try and stick to 5 and kind of go through different periods of life. An early film that I absolutely, and I'm not going to talk about Star Wars and the fact that I'm a massive, massive Star Wars nerd. Love the Star Wars films. I'll just kind of set that aside. So as a kid, you could go to the library and rent out like VHS copies of movies, and they were usually older movies. Like they had all the Thin Man and Charlie Chan films and stuff at the library. But they had the old Basil Rathbone Sherlock Holmes films, and I loved these. And so I thought I was getting The Hound of the Baskervilles, which I loved. I'd already watched it. I was like, yeah, I'm going to get this again. And I got home, and I took out the VHS, put it in the VCR that night, and I could tell, like, this isn't Sherlock Holmes. What the heck is this? Like, there's a bunch of birds quacking in, like, a bird bath. What the heck? And then in the first 3 minutes, there's, like, this bizarre song, and this guy with this mustache and these glasses and eyebrows comes on a fire pole and joins the song. And then I was just in trance. And it was Duck Soup by the Marx Brothers. And I was so happy that the library or some other library patron had screwed up the VHS copies, because it introduced me to Duck Soup, which is one of my all-time favorite comedies. I can't stop, quoting it, making jokes about it. Now that I have 2 daughters, we kind of joke that like there's a Groucho Chico Harpo dynamic between us, with my wife as Zeppo, the good-looking one. And it's just the antics, the zaniness, and especially the songs. Like, I knew the lyrics to War probably, I think I was like 7 at the time, maybe 8, and just loved it. My mom hates Duck Soup, and my father just tolerated it. So I'm fortunate that my wife allows me to enjoy it. So Duck Soup kind of as a kid. As a teenager, I think the Maltese Falcon. So I really liked Casablanca. I really liked Bonnie and Clyde. Those are sort of like films that I was like, ooh, these are interesting. But the Maltese Falcon, it hit sort of like these mystery beats. It developed the idea of a femme fatale with Mary Astor's character, Miss O'Shaughnessy, and Bogart was great. And I think it just sort of, it was one of the first movies I saw where there wasn't this like tidy ending. The mystery wasn't solved. They were left with this like lead statuette, not the jewel encrusted, golden falcon. And the writing was so tight and interesting, but the idea of what a movie can be, what a narrative can be, was just really fascinating for me. In college, it'd probably be the Royal Tenenbaums. So I had a lot of friends who liked that, and that came out when I was in high school. So my wife really likes that too, so we quote that frequently. We'll watch it and laugh, and it has Wes Anderson always has great music. It has a great dynamic in terms of family and all the wrong things that can happen in a family, but all the right things that can happen in a family, and why that's valuable, why that's important. And so that's just one I've always liked. And then Nashville, directed by Robert Altman, which is great because it's 1975, and it's probably my favorite 70s film. And you have I think it's 24 characters, and across a 2.5-hour movie, where the dialogue always overlaps, so you can basically pick a character and follow that character throughout the movie, and then rewatch it and follow a different character throughout the movie, and you have two totally different experiences. And each time I watch it, I kind of have a different character I'm interested in, And there are ones like Lily Tomlin's character who explores like, what is it like to be, to have talent and to be a parent and be, in a marriage, but to realize that there are aspects of that that don't fulfill you, and how do you reconcile that and how do you deal with that, in in a way that keeps your dignity or your integrity, is just an absolutely astonishing portrayal, even though she has maybe 20 minutes, of screen time, and it's just astonishing. But there's so many really cool and interesting characters there. Henry Gibson, where instead of having a shorter actor and trying to always hide it, they amp up the fact that the big star, or the sort of the fading big star, is a short dude, or surrounded by everybody else, and he's always trying to hold himself up and measure up, and the songs are just so, they're not like country from the 70s, they're not even outlaw country from the 70s, but they're interesting, and they have this poignancy to them. So I love that. Ron, by Akira Kurosawa, which is King Lear in feudal Japan, with 3 sons whose armies wear yellow, red, and blue instead of 3 daughters. And Edmund is a female character who plans this massive betrayal. It's just wild, and the color in that is just lurid and furious. And then I loved those like screwball romantic comedies. Awful Truth, It Happened One Night. But one that I think really captures it is The Palm Beach Story, which I highly recommend. It's a Preston Sturges one, where what's probably coolest about it is Claudette Colbert, who always plays like intelligent but three-dimensional characters. She always feels very human, and that she's also smarter than everybody else, on the screen. Is just a gem in that. She's so funny, and she's constantly like maneuvering through situations, both like as a woman, but just as a person as well, and maneuvering through it in a way that is so funny, but also so intelligent, and I love that one. More recently, kind of movies that I've liked from the past 10 years that are hard to separate: Midnight in Paris, Atomic Blonde, great action film, and incredible music, and again that like 80s neon aesthetic that's just glorious. The Skyfall James Bond movie was pretty solid, now that I think about that. Ladybird was really cool, and that was sort of set around the time when I was around the same age as those characters, so that had a really cool dynamic around growing up in Sacramento. Phoenix is much larger than Sacramento, but I think a lot of people have an idea that it's urban but still semi-provincial. So those are just a number of movies I've enjoyed across the years. So, Jules and Jim, French New Wave, 2 friends, one's Austrian, I believe he's Austrian, might be German, and the other's French. They hang out during the Belle Epoque. They both fall in love with the same woman, played by Jeanne Moreau, Catherine. And I first saw that in college, and that was a weird movie because you could see that Catherine was like, nobody could have a healthy, stable relationship with Catherine, but you so badly want both of them to. You so badly want her to find this happiness with them. Jeanne Moreau has so much energy. The way she cheats in a foot race. It is just, there's so much joy and life in her portrayal. And Truffaut, it's new wave without the new wave style getting in the way, and it's not over the top. So those are just a few films I love. There are so many more. The Red Shoes. I could probably list 100, but I'll stick with those. So thank you again, everyone, for all of the great questions. You've all been wonderful. I love you all. You can tell me I'm crazy. You can feel free to comment if you will. But thank you and good night.